Today I'm talking about how I acoustically treated my office for better audio, what materials I used, and how I planned the layout. I will also jump between the acoustically treated space and this untreated room of similar dimension to test the audio throughout the video. So there are many different ways to acoustically treat a room depending on what kind of audio you will be recording. This video will be focusing on acoustically treating a room for spoken word, such as for YouTube videos and voiceover, although this layout may still be better than a completely untreated room for recording or mixing music if you want to have multiple uses for your space. As spoken word will be the main use for the space, the objective was to remove as much echo as possible and have a decent amount of treatment covering each wall while trying to keep costs down. Keeping that in mind, the products I chose are fairly decent quality, but they aren't the most expensive options on the market. These graphs show the performance of the acoustic treatment I chose compared to Auralex, probably the standard for high quality acoustic treatment. I'm using 4-inch foam wedges from Foam Factory, foam bass traps from Foam Factory, and sound blankets specifically made for sound absorption from Vocal Booth To Go. Once I had decided on what products to buy, I had to plan the layout of each wall to determine how much of each product I would need. I'm not going to go into too much detail about why I chose to cover what areas, as I discuss it in my previous video linked here about the basics of acoustics as well as what areas of a room are most important to focus on to give you the best results. Check that video out if you want to know more about the why of what I'm doing here, but make sure to come back. The first step is to measure the length and height of each wall and then draw them out on graphing paper. Be sure to include windows, doors, and any other features you need to work around. Then take a picture of the drawings and pull it up on trusty old paint. This lets you put your drawings beside the wall so you can superimpose the acoustic treatment and play around with placement. Once you have them beside each other, they will likely not be the same size. Draw a line over a feature such as a window or wall corners and then line them up in your graph. Enlarge or shrink the graph so that it and the wall picture measure the same. This part is important to be able to place the acoustic treatment accurately. Then find out the measurements of the acoustic treatment that you will be using. For example, the bass traps I wanted are 2 feet long and 1 foot wide, so I can draw that on my graph and know it will line up perfectly against my wall. I did the same thing for the sound blanket and the foam wedges. Next, I took the drawings of the acoustic treatment and put them on the wall picture to get a better idea of how it would actually look on the wall itself. I completed this before I knew how to use Photoshop, which would be a better way of doing this. So I just copy and pasted each item and tried to line it up in the same orientation. In Photoshop, it's possible to build the image with the graph overlapped. Not completely necessary, but it gives you a more accurate preview. So this is what I did for every wall, and it gave me the chance to play around with placement instead of doing it live and either ruining the wall by placing and removing the treatment or screwing up one way or the other. After doing this step, I knew exactly how many pieces I needed, the coverage I would get for each wall, how much I would need to spend without buying extras, and exactly where everything would go. After the placement planning stage, it's time to consider what kind of supporting materials are needed to get all the acoustic treatment onto the wall. The foam wedges and the bass traps being stuck to the wall need an adhesive, and the sound blankets needed some way of being hung. For the foam, I used these dry wall stickies that can be removed without stripping the paint. A mistake I made was putting the stickies against the foam directly. I'm not sure why I thought it was a good idea, but most of them didn't last very long. As weeks went by, the foam wedges fell one by one because the adhesive didn't work very well against the foam directly. To fix this, I instead purchased spray adhesive and attached cardboard to the back of the wedges first before reapplying the stickies to the back of the cardboard. For the sound blankets, I just used standard curtain rods, but because they are so much heavier than the regular curtains, I decided I wanted to go directly into the studs instead of using drywall support plugs. I've had issues with these falling out in the past with the regular curtains, so I thought the heavier sound blankets would definitely need more support. Because of this, I was much more limited with where I could put the rod supports, and unfortunately the placement ended up being asymmetrical. Once all the planning was done, it was just a matter of marking out all the measurements on the walls and following the graphs I made. I followed mine pretty closely, but I did scrap the idea of putting bass traps behind the curtain rods. As well as for this wall, I originally thought I would have the sound blanket overlap the foam, but then I thought it might not be a great idea for the blanket to be rubbing against the foam, and over time it potentially being ripped off the wall. Here's how this space used to sound like. And here is how it sounds now. So that's how I went about acoustically treating the space. I will leave links down below in the description to where you can buy the same products that I ended up using. Thank you very much for watching, and if you got any value out of this video at all, I would really appreciate you hitting that like button and leaving a comment below. Let me know what kind of acoustic treatment you use to get better audio for your recordings. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.